All right. Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Today, just because of Bad News Bear, we're going to talk about Joseph Stalin and his legacy on this world. Let's talk about Stalin. Oh, yeah, even the mob had enough integrity to say families off limits. We're living in a watershed moment. Either we are silenced or we overcome. Exactly. And you think I'm alone? I'm only speaking on behalf of literally millions of people. All of academia is fucked. I get letters all the time from students and professors being like, you can't believe what's happening, man. Like, I now have to sign, people now have to sign documents about their white privilege. Do you think that why do you think I'm doing this shit? I just want to talk about how men and women are different. It's like, now to be like in a class or blah, 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 you have to sign white privilege documentation. You know, there was a Princeton professor that just refused to say, to apologize for saying the word nigger in context, and they're all calling for his head. This is a moment, man. You got to stand up to it, and that's a perfect transition into Joseph Stalin, Soviet newspaper. We do not fight against believers. We do not fight against believers and not even clergymen. We fight against God to snatch believers from him. So one of the reasons that there was the Soviets forced atheism. They took all the church bells and they melted them down into guns and bullets. Because Marx had a famous quote that allowed the intellectuals and the power-hungry psychopaths to push this idea. It was that religion is the opiate of the masses. I'll show you why that's wrong on so many levels. Anyone who refers to people as the masses is not a good guy. Just know that. When someone says the masses, it means they don't view human beings as human beings, that it's just a mass. It's about power acquisition, right? So what they would say, what that means is that religion, the belief in God, is the opiate. It's the way to alleviate pain from the masses, and that to take away God would wake up people to reality. In fact, it couldn't be farther from the truth. And Jordan Peterson has a great quote. He said, if God is the opiate to the masses, then socialism is methamphetamines. Because what it does, when you relieve the human spirit and mind of any higher ideal or any sense of good and evil, you open up hell, literally and figuratively. Because now that once human being that could get along with other human beings because they had a shared idea is now that it's all just individuals seeking power. And humans are very strong, very smart animals. And so if you alleviate the concept of a shared purpose, a shared idea, a shared goal, you open up, we're in the jungle again. We're in the jungle, but with hydrogen bombs. It's terrifying. You know, you want people to believe in God. And people that say religion has caused all these, Christianity's killed all these people, they're just straight up wrong. Hey, love. Oh, George. Oh, cool. Hey, Georgie. I mean, socialism itself killed 250 million of its own people in just the 20th century. And a lot of the blood on Christianity's hands, the death counts are so low, it's just insane, you know, like the Salem witch trials. I don't know, what was that, 9 people? Or you have the Inquisition, sounded really bad, but it's still just it's thousands versus hundreds of millions. And usually a lot of the religious wars had way more to do with the state than it did the religion itself. Like there's 300 years of war in Europe over the different sects of Christianity. Once Martin Luther and his Reformation came, you'd have the Baptists, the Anabaptists, you know, the Lutherans, then all these different types of Christianity came out. And the reason they fought was because it was a zero-sum game. The winner took all, right? The winner would then have the state align itself with their type of Christianity. So then all the others would be seen as heretics. So it created this frenzy where the only, it was Baptists and Presbyterians and Lutherans and Anabaptists and all these people. If they didn't become the state's official religion, then they would potentially be seen as heretics and killed. So that war wasn't about religion. Those wars were about the state. It was about the state having a monopoly on force, and then only allowing one type of religion to exist. And so they weren't fighting because of God, they were fighting to survive. And so that's not a comparable thing. Socialism, the reason it's so monstrous is once you realize what socialism is, the one thing that makes it impossible is the existence of human beings. And that's why nothing about my career, nothing about money, nothing about any of that stuff, not even my life, is worth me repeating something I know that horrifying. And there's so many people that will say, oh no, look at this, look at Sweden or look at Germany, like these little countries in Europe are doing socialism. No, they're not though. They're not. And there's a million factors, and I can argue every person's point right down to the bone. Trust me. But let's just talk about how every time it's really, really been tried, it ends in such horror and why this happens. So this is the evolution of how to get to Joseph Stalin. It starts with an intellectual like Karl Marx. And Karl Marx was not a good person. He's really bad to his family. He's probably a smart guy, but he probably wasn't a lethal person. Probably never killed anybody. Just kind of a scumbag. And he wrote the Communist Manifesto. Is that what he wrote? I don't remember. But he gave an idea that is so powerful, not because of its validity. It's so easily argued against. What it is it appeals to the megalomaniac who thinks that they know what's best for society, right? That if someone can centrally engineer a society, it'll be best for everyone, right? Father knows best. Except we're talking about Father has an army, and it's talking about adults. That's not what Father knows best is about. And so what socialism believes is that the group is the important thing, and the individuals are just cogs in the machine of the group, right? So to each his ability is what they would say. And there is no money or possession or anything. So whatever someone is good at, that's what they do. And whatever they make becomes part of the group. And that's it. And then you need a strong government to start this process. They take control of the industries. Socialism is when the government has control of the major industries, and then communism is the result. It's the utopia that happens after the withering away of the government. Think about that concept, the withering away. That once you get a Stalin, what he's going to do is he's just going to start stepping back and say, you know what, people? You guys got this. And this is what it is. And so once the central government gets in control of all the industry, they never, ever give it back, ever. And they now don't know what anything costs. And now, how do you decide what someone is good at and what they should do? So if someone said, well, you're going to be a cobbler. We need a cobbler in this town. Well, I don't want to be a cobbler. I want to be a horse rider. I'm better at horse riding. Yeah, but we already have a horse rider. And he's my cousin. So we're going to need you to be that cobbler because you're good at that. But I'm not, I don't want, no, you're going to do it or you're dead. And then they accumulate all the wealth of everyone doing everything. And now no one's working hard anymore because no matter how hard they work, it doesn't matter. They still get the same thing. So you just won't be motivated anymore. And so then they now don't know what anything costs because cost is because of supply and demand. How much of something exists and how much people want it is how you decide what something costs. And costs change based on supply and demand. If you get more pencils, they become cheaper if the same amount of people want the pencils. If more people want pencils, they become more expensive because it's like, well, I want a pencil. So do I. Well, I'll give you $1 more. I'll give you $2 more. That's how you get price. If you have a central government that decides all price, there's no way of knowing. And so what you get is just insane inefficiency to the point where people start starving. And what happens also is you got to stick to this insane idea. All right, so let's get to Stalin. So it starts with Marx, and then the first step is you get a Lenin, right? So Lenin definitely believed communism was possible, but he also had the ability of being a murderous psychopath. So they take over, they beat the Tsar, Tsar Nicholas II. They kill his wife and his children and him. And they saw that as an act of bravery because they knew what was best for the masses and the people, because the Tsar had prisons and he kept people in jail sometimes. And he was not a good Tsar. Cut to 20 years later, there is 1,000 times more prisons than when the Tsar happened. And the conditions inside the prison are so inhumane and so unbelievable that you would not even, it wouldn't have been believed. Like the Tsar's prison, a political dissident, they would still be able to see their friends and family. They would have walks in a park, all this stuff, and under Lenin or Stalin in the gulags, they would send you to Siberia where you would work yourself to death if you weren't executed, if you disagreed with them at all. And so like, to imagine being one of those guys and remembering what it was like under the Tsar. And by no means under the Tsar was it a great situation. I mean, they had slavery, they had serfs. If you bought land, it came with people. Like Tolstoy had slaves, white, by the way. So I don't know if that affects your little narrative that you got going on there, but it's not like it was the greatest environment, but compared to socialism, it was absolutely heaven. And so Stalin, when Lenin dies, there's two guys up for the job. It's Leon Trotsky, and Joseph Stalin. And Stalin, like Trotsky's more of an ideologue. Like Trotsky actually kind of believed in the bullshit. And Stalin was just middle management and lethal and intelligent. And so Trotsky realizes that he's in danger. So he flees. He goes to, I think, Argentina or Mexico, where he's living in exile and he's hidden away, but Stalin still knows he's a threat to the position. So he sends some guys there and they stab him in the back of the head with an ice pick. So that's, without elections, that's kind of how you get power in a socialist environment, Che Guevara. So he stabs his competition in the back of the head with an ice pick. He's dead. So Stalin gets control. And now Stalin is the king of doublespeak. Like everything, like a prison would be called like, what was that called? A political, I can't remember. It's all so ironic. Like if you spoke out against the government, it would be called, basically the equivalent of hate speech. That everything was, they figured out how to make words the best weapon, where if you did anything, you were, there would be a term that they would put on you that would be hilariously the opposite. It'd be like, Osama bin Laden is a freedom fighter, and then George Washington is a terrorist, and they flip it around. And so he takes control, and the idea behind socialism is it's not about who's successful. In fact, if you're successful, it means somehow you got privilege, that you somehow have cheated, that you have, that there's the haves and the have-nots, and you're a have, and it's time for the have-nots to get what they deserve. Little do they know that the haves have these big farms and whatnot because they're really, really good at farming. And so what they would do, they were called the kulaks. It was a group of Ukrainians that were small business owners, basically, right? And they had all these wonderful farms. And so Stalin had already imposed a gun confiscation. Does any of this sound familiar? Just feel free. Where they would take everyone's guns away for their safety, or any weapons. They weren't allowed to have weapons. And so then they killed all the kulaks. Long story short, they killed 20 million kulaks. 20 million, right? Million. 20 million of these people were killed or sent to Siberia, where they would be killed. All right, so now all the farms are opened up for the have-nots. Finally, they can be free, right? The thing about a lot of these have-nots, they didn't have any farming skills, and they weren't good at farming, and they then realized that they then didn't know who got the control of which part of the farming or who benefited the most or anything. There's no way to tell because it wasn't based on merit. It wasn't based on anything. It was based on centralized planning. And so the central planning was so inefficient that they would want productivity that was impossible. So they would fake it. They would start faking how much food they were given the state, because if they didn't meet the quotas, they would be put in a gulag. So they would just start lying, right? If you do that long enough, what happens? 6 million Ukrainians starve to death in one winter because they don't have any more food, right? Because there's no way of telling how much food is being produced because everyone is lying. When you live in a world where everyone starts lying, everyone starts dying. Same thing happened with Mao in China. There's something called the Great Leap Forward, where they were going to collectivize, become communists, and they were all going to become a John Lennon song, right? Same thing happened. They would not be able to reach their quotas because they melted all the church bells for all this shit iron that couldn't be used, and all the equipment started falling apart. And they were so scared of the repercussions because if they didn't meet their quotas, the market economy would just say, well, then you won't make as much money, but try harder. And that guy got it done and he's going to make more money, and now we're just going to have a hierarchy, right? But in this world, if you didn't make enough, you like died or went to prison. So you desperately lied and said you made more wheat than you did. And there's all these false photographs of children sitting on wheat fields because it was that dense, because the communists figured it out, right? In reality, they did not grow enough. So 40 million people died in 5 years of starvation. 40 million people. Are you starting to understand the horror of socialism? 40 million people. Million starved because no one will tell the truth. Okay, so now there is no, under Stalin, when he gave a speech, everyone would clap at the end, right? Think about witnessing this scene. And this is true. This is documented. This is 100% true. Just clap. Okay. Because the first person who stopped clapping, they know would go to a gulag and be executed or have to work themselves to death in Siberia. The first person to stop clapping, that's what would happen to them, right? So what would happen? Imagine witnessing this madness where just minute after minute, no one could stop clapping. And he's just standing there watching to see who's going to be the first to stop clapping. And people are exhausted and they're thirsty and their knees start shaking. This is all real. 8.5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, 12 minutes in, people can't stop. They know if they stop clapping, they die. One guy passes out. So then everyone else stops clapping. That guy gets taken, sent to Siberia for a tenor. They called it a tenor. That's 10 years. And he died very, very quickly. So that is the world of socialism. And that's not unique. That same thing happened in China. Same thing happened in Cuba. Same thing happened everywhere. So when people say, don't say that word, don't say this, don't say that, your joke offended me and your joke hurt me. No. What will hurt you is if I'm not allowed to speak my truth. And I don't think that black people are only good at stealing bikes and getting AIDS. And I know you know that. I know you all know that. Everyone knows that's a joke. Everyone knows exactly the structure of what I just did is humor. It's an exaggeration, and there's irony and context and a hyperbole, and that isn't a statement of truth. It's a joke, but that's where truth really lies, is where if I do that, it relieves the tension of white people who are sick of being said that they somehow owe people for something that slavery, it was 150 years ago. That's an insane concept. And you can't really match it head on because then you have just crazy conflict, right? If you're like, we don't owe you shit. You know, my family came here as Jews in the 1920s or 30s. Like, how the fuck do I owe you money? Because of my skin color. And then they go, yeah, that's what all the white people say because you got privilege. You don't know what I've been through. And then that's just hell, right? So jokes help social lubrication. Where you do that joke, you realize you're not alone. You realize that it's all kind of a joke and that this whole reparations thing is not really going to happen and everyone's going to calm down. And that allows societies to work together, right? And so when you silence me and you say you have to apologize, you don't think I know about all this shit? Political correctness is a term invented by Mao. That's the roots of this. Political correct means the language that is correct for the revolution of the state, right? So I'm artists, comedians, these guys, these are the first people killed. You think Stalin, here's the thing about Stalin, and here's the thing, this is my warning to leftists, and it's not a threat for me at all. I'm not your threat. I may help save you. You eat yourselves. And if you read the Gulag Archipelago or any of these books, what happens is there's a certain type of revolutionary. Like right now in America, there would be like Black Lives Matter or the third wave feminists or any of these people talking about, these are the words, equality, inclusion, and diversity. That's all socialism, all of it. Equality means equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. That's socialism. That means no matter how good you are, no matter your experience, doesn't matter. There has to be the same demographics in every job as in the population, which is insane. That can't happen. Look at just like piano makers are going to be more from like one country than another based on their history, or like Asians are better at math because of rice farming, because you could grow so much more rice from like one little square. And if you understood calculus and stuff like that, you grew more rice. So your culture would develop an ability of math that a lot of people didn't. Another reason the Chinese are better at math is because when they count, it's more efficient. You know, they don't have like 13, 14, 15. Like for them, it'd be 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4. So that's easier for a child to understand. And that little advantage now exponentially increases someone's ability to do math. And you can't account for that. The problem with central planning is the arrogance of it. The arrogance that I experienced of someone who wasn't at a show, who realizes that I did not say something correct. That maybe I know something about comedy that they don't know, or a joke that they don't understand. But the thing about the socialists and the social justice warriors and all these people, the leftists, is they think they know more than you about what's right for you. And they want to centrally plan it. They want to say, you can't say this word. And then I will do a valid argument. Why can't I say nigger, but I can say rape, Holocaust, hate, infidel, and I'll just list them. Cancer. You don't think cancer, if I say cancer, you know how many people think about their dying mom who they watch die of pancreatic cancer? That word can hurt people more than the word nigger. There's no one in America that was a slave. None. None of them are alive. Want to know who are alive? Rape victims. If I say the word rape, you don't think that's more of a jarring? What about fireworks? Are we allowed to have fireworks? Because I'll tell you what, vets with PTSD, when they hear those boom, 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 they're crying and hiding under a table like a dog. Do we protect them from that? We get rid of all our fireworks because someone has PTSD? Where does it end? And at that point, they know they have no point. There is no point. That's why I do this. There is no argument against what I'm doing. The only argument is you're bad. You're a racist. You're human garbage. What you're doing is evil. You shouldn't be able to talk. I don't want my kids around you. I want your kid to be aborted. People told me last night that my son should be aborted. Like people with blue check marks on Twitter. You don't think I know the threat level of what happens if these people get power? We're done, man. And Stalin is one of many. What happens is when you put your power, centralized power, you can't, like, everything goes to shit. There's no comedy in Russia. That's why when you'd have that guy that came to America, I can't remember his name. He'd be like, in Russia, and then he'd just say the opposite. And we'd laugh because we were living in an honest world. And America's had a lot of problems. But at least we're allowed to speak what we feel. And that's very important. When you can speak what you know is true, you can get through the trauma and the devastation of life. And all life ends. And it's going to end with sadness and pain. Because like the people we love will die. Our children one day will die. We one day will die, and it happens with agony. But that's okay as long as you can speak the truth, because you can get through it. Humans are strong, right? And we can get through it together if we just speak the truth. And if someone says you can't say that because people can't handle it, you start bubble wrapping society, right? And then before you know it, you say, well, you can't, that art, you can't have that art because people can't handle it, right? There was no music in the Soviet Union. It was centralized. That's why Shostakovich, who I played for you that one time, this beautiful song came from a gulag, a prison. You can't do this. Like, how's that going? It goes. When you hear the thing that would kill me about this song was the first, it was like almost like you could feel the ray of light through the darkness. It was like, no, it goes, that's not it. I'm messing it up, but anyway, you get the idea. That was illegal. That song, like writing that music was illegal. So all art had to come from the States. So it all started to suck. It was total shit. And Jordan Peterson now collects Soviet art because it's such a joke. It's like whatever the state said you should. There's a great quote. The reason American ingenuity is so unbelievable is because you can't invent anything with a gun to your head. And most things were invented by white people, straight up. And I'll tell you why it's not about race, and I'll explain. The reason the cultural appropriation sounds so insane is because of how many things were appropriated by white Europeans, right? So, capitalism, democracy, the internet, computers, cell phones, airplanes, cars, all of it, right? And then when you see the cultural appropriation thing by the left, and it's like, well, you're not allowed to wear a sombrero because that is not your hat, white man. And you're like, well, you just drove here in a car, use your cell phone. The reason that is happening is not because black people can't invent things or because white people are so special. It's because no one can do anything new or beautiful in a society revolving around force. That's mind-blowing, right? You can't invent something with a gun to your head. Anything centrally planned, right? And so this is why this conversation is getting so hard. Because I'm about to say something that's you're not going to think I would say, because I'm not drawing lines in the sand. European colonialism of Africa was very destructive to a lot of African areas. And I get that they didn't, when the Europeans came, it wasn't like they had these great, beautiful civilizations and we crushed them and all that. A lot of the civilizations were hunter-gatherer. But at the same time, what happened after was if there's a civilization that does not understand lines as nation states, where it's about where food goes or where fresh water is, or just tribal mentality. There's a lot of that in the Americas when people landed. And the real fight wasn't between races. It was between the ways of seeing the world. That's why there's the famous story about Manhattan cost like $12. It was because that American Indian didn't understand the concept of money. Like currency wasn't something they were using. And so those two worldviews mixed in a way that caused a lot of destruction for Africans. Because if you just draw lines in the sand that cross tribal migration patterns, no one really understands what the hell is going on. So that starts creating a culture of force, where if one group is trying to explain something and the other group doesn't understand what they're trying to talk about, you have to just forcibly keep them there. Because it's like, no, but I have to go that way. It's like, no, but this is your area. We had this whole peace accord and this is the thing. And they're like, and they don't understand what that means. And the other people don't understand that a nation state can be near animals. And so from there, you start developing this culture of force, And so then when you have countries, it's not because white Europeans are like, we have to break these people. It's literally, it's just people. And so what happens then is in a culture of force, you can't invent anything. You can't innovate. And that's happened in Europe for centuries. There's not a lot of innovation going on in the dark ages in Europe because it was feudalism. It was like, you do what we tell you to do, you give us your shit. And then with the Renaissance, and that happened because of the Black Plague, it freed up so much land that peasants actually became valuable, And so then when you get this Western culture that was an amalgamation of Judaism, Christianity, the Greeks, and this environment that, like the environment that had already developed the understanding of saving, of capitalism, because the winter would come. So you had to learn to put your grain away. And that's one of the reasons you started, like the Europeans think in terms of nation states, in terms of currency, because in the winter you have to have something saved up and you have to know where your farms are. If you're a farmer, you understand lines in the sand. If you're a hunter-gatherer in an environment with no winter, you never have to understand that. So the Europeans now have this beautiful combination of all these factors that created so much innovation, so much invention, so much of all this stuff. So then now this concept of racism is so crazy. And to be someone that really has taken the time to understand how this all operates together, and to be an innovator, to be someone, I can't work with a gun to my head. I can't work with someone saying, you apologize or we're going to keep shaming your wife. That makes me go more. A lot of American Indians face that. A lot of them would cut off their own tongues and strangle themselves when they were put in a cage because they couldn't survive in prison. And I'm like that with cultural prison. I can't take orders from dumb people. I never have. In school, it was a problem. And then it became a huge asset in art. And then it became a problem in Hollywood when Hollywood's institutional madness started making it so when you say the truth, you're punished. And now that I get to have my own pipeline where I never am forced to say what I don't believe. I'm now accumulating more and more people that are into this. We're innovating. This is great. And now if someone holds a gun to my head and says, admit you're racist and apologize. I'm not, man. Like, they don't see any of this. It's just, that's a bad word. And I know what's better for you. And it's when two worldviews are colliding, it's so difficult to have a conversation. I did this tweet that went pretty viral. And it went viral because the argument was so, both sides could not understand what the other side was thinking. I said, if a black man rapes a woman, by the way, I didn't specify, did I specify white woman? If I did, that's a mistake. I shouldn't have even specified white woman because it could be, I don't think. Why would I do that? The whole concept is, the what if has nothing to do with that. It could be a black woman, doesn't matter. If a woman gets raped by a black man and she calls him a nigger, Hollywood is more offended by the word than the action. That concept just caused a firestorm because one side says a raped woman gets to say anything to hurt that guy. And by calling him a nigger does not mean she's a racist. It means she's trying to just demean him because he raped her. Nothing in this world is more demeaning to a woman than rape. It's saying that your body, what you hold so valuable, the egg in your womb that is the life of our next generation, that which you are protective of, that which you are going to choose your strongest man to be the father of that. I will strip that away and take it from you because I have more force. That's so evil, right? And then the word nigger is a relic. It's an ignorant word from a time that is gone, thankfully, when human beings were seen as cattle. And so one person sees it almost as equal. So many people were like, well, one's a racist and one's a rapist. So what's worse? I'm like, you think that like a woman should have the right to just scream and cry and beat him and kill him and say anything he wants. There's not more. What's more demeaning than killing a man? If a raped woman kills her attacker, but she can't say a word, and then you see it all unfold, and you see these two ways of seeing the world, where one way says, but the power told me that word is bad, so if you say it, you're going against the power, and that makes you bad. And then another side says, if you look at this as human beings, what's really worse, rape or a word? And there are people that truly do not see the difference, truly. And And that's growing. And I have to fight it, because if that grows, under Stalin, 60 million of his own people died. And someone could say, "Oh, and you're being hyperbolic." Am I? What if it's only a tenth? That's still 6 million. 9/11 was 3,000. Look at what it did to us. Imagine if the government starts being able to say who's right and who's wrong. What someone can say, what someone can't say. And we live in a country full of people like me. People, individualists. People that say, "Don't tread on me. Don't cross this line. Don't tell me what I can believe." Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, the right to protect yourself. These are all things that this is why we invent everything. When I say, "All right, well, you're using all this stuff and this is invented by the whites. Why don't you pump the brakes? Black people maybe invented peanut butter." That is about our culture and our way of life. And it's true. And it's like when a slave isn't going to invent anything. It's not about black or white. It's just it's so complicated to explain that you just have to do this hyperbole. But it's like the truth is right there if anyone wants to see it. If you're in a world where the more you work and the more creative you are and the more people you include in your team and the more people you help and the more people that support you, the better you do, that's beautiful. That's when comedy thrives. There was no Stalingrad funny bone. People say, go back to the jokes. If this doesn't back down, there are no more jokes. Look at that tweet I did about all late night comedians, how they all are part of the same party. They all think the same thing. It's already here. There are no more jokes if language is centralized. And I will say the word nigger just to show it. I don't like the word. It's an ugly word. I don't like the way people look at me and my family. It has to be done. There has to be sacrifice. There has to be someone who says, "I'm saying the word." And if you use force to shut me up, you just proved we're not free right now. It's already gone. I'm an artist. Art has no limits. Yeah, the Irish are super funny. Exactly, because they were slaves for 1,000 years. Hey, Owen, why is the chat in so much chaos? Because they're coming at me, man. They know that if they delete my account on Twitter, that I'll be a rallying call. They know that. So they're trying to fuck this up. And there is a they. It's people who want governmental federal power. It's so fucking obvious. They don't want free speech. They don't want people saying what I'm saying, that races really aren't dividing people, that gender is not dividing people. Artists show that human beings are valuable as themselves. And that saying one word does not get you excluded from a goddamn fucking town. And once you set up a society that's capable of that, you can take control of them, take all their money, and put them in fucking prison. That's why the chaos is fucking crazy on my chat, and you don't know who is who and who isn't who. But you can't fall for it, man. You can't fall for it. They're trying to create false enemies. This is what the CIA and people like that does. They do it in other countries all the time. This is what the British Empire did to some of these countries that people are talking about in fucking Wakanda. You go to a nation, or you go to a part of Africa, and you have two warring tribes, right? You make sure they never stop fighting. That's what they fucking do. It's ancient. This is hundreds of years old. They did it to the Irish. You know? Powers that be love when the Catholics and Protestants don't get along. The powers that be love when the Sunnis and Shiite don't get along. When you separate two people based on some arbitrary thing, and then you make sure they fight forever, you keep power and no one ever comes at you. Why do you think such a few amount of English people could maintain India? It's so obvious. And they're doing it to America right now, a country that I love and will fight for. We are not divided by race and gender. I'm not a cis white straight man. And it makes it so that you can't speak your truth because of arbitrary bullshit words. And we all feel it, man. We feel the tension all the time. And do not give in to force. Richard Spencer is now a Bernie supporter. Oh, I know. I called that 6 months ago. That alt-right is socialism. People that see the world as power and not as individuals actually get along really well. That's why CNN doesn't see the horrors of North Korea. That's why CNN was praising North Korea, even though North Korea has millions of slaves right now. But yet, if I say nigger, someone's like, well, 150 years ago, they were slaves, so that hurts people. Well, they go, look at North Korea parade. It's like, what? Because North Korea is based on force. They have the leftism in America kind of envies it. They're like, yeah, dude gets it done. They back Kim Jong-un over Trump. When Trump talks shit about North Korea, they're like, don't get him mad. It's because they fucking like force. That's why when an Islamic terrorist does some shit to America, they go, do not react. Do not react. Do not be Islamophobic. And then a white guy does something, they're like, we need to take the guns away from the whites. It's because Islam works well with leftism because it's based on force. The whole fucking religion is based on submission. And of course there are good Muslims because I see the world as individuals. And leftists can't understand that when I attack Islam, I'm not attacking Muslim individuals because someone's demographic does not define them. Ha 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 ha. And just keep hitting it, baby. It's so much worse than that. It's leftism, dude. It's about we get to tell you what to say. We get to tell you what to say. That's what it is. And they say, and they need an atheist power structure based on the government needs a Christ figure. And that is black people for them. They say because of what they went through, they just don't tell them, you can't say anything to them. They're so weakened by a word. And they go, if you're white, you're born with privilege. You want to know what that is? It's called, in Christianity, it's called original sin. It means that you're born with a sin on you. And that's the American atheist socialism religion is white privilege is original sin. And then you just keep going from there. And to stay pure in your weird government cult, you can't say anything that goes against what anyone says, even if it's trans 3-year-olds on hormone blockers. And that was a watershed moment for me in this free speech thing. It was when people saw me stand up to that, it jarred them a little where they went, oh my God, they'll say something.